think it's the mystery of growing orchids. And I'm going to tell you right now, there is no mystery of it. There's just you asking the questions you need answered. Because I will tell you anything you want to know about growing orchids. I'm not keeping it a secret.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of Green Acres and our guests. These general gardening tips and suggestions may work for you, as well as those from alternative sources. When using any garden products or tools, read and follow all labeled directions. And learn how to make your yard summer strong at bewatersmart.info.
The Green Acres Garden Podcast is the podcast dedicated to helping gardeners hone their growing skills while we celebrate our love of plants. So whether you're new to growing or a seasoned gardener, you're sure to learn something new. Join the fun as we have conversations with world-class growers, passionate green thumbs, and professional garden experts from Green Acres Nursery and Supply. Listen every week. We'll answer questions you didn't know you had. The more I weed, the less I hoe, the more I let my garden grow. Hey-o. Whoa. Hey there, Austin. How's it going?
Hello. Yeah, you must be in a good mood because you start singing again, and that's a Chili Pepper song.
Dude,
I know that one.
Yeah, right. I'm feeling. Actually, I was planting peppers all this morning with my students. But we're not talking peppers this week.
Okay.
We're talking something else. A topic that'll take us from every continent except for Antarctica, and of course the North Pole, which is not a continent. It takes us all over the world, from the tropics to here in our own backyard. From cookies and cakes. I'm talking about a plant that is so beautiful and so diverse. There may be more species of this one group than any other group out there. And I'm talking about orchids, Austin.
Orchids. How cool is that? Yeah, we've talked about orchids in the past, but I always learn something new every time we get back into this topic. And that's definitely true today because we had an incredible guest, the Orchid Whisperer.
Dude, amazing. So this week, I'm fired up. We just got off the interview with Dr. Dotty Woodson. She lives out in Texas. Shout out. Amazing. Oh my God, I'm so fired up. She's so knowledgeable and passionate, but also just as lovely as a person as you could hope to meet. But I'm telling you, her knowledge and passion for orchids, it runs deep, buddy. I'm talking Mariana Trench levels deep. And so it's one of those things where during that interview, I just closed my mouth and just listened. And all my questions, I barely even had to ask because she was just already just fired up and ready to rock. So I had a blast. What'd you think, Austin?
I totally agree. I'm excited for our listeners to hear this interview because it is full, jam-packed, full of care advice for orchids, but also just interesting stories and little tidbits about orchids that I didn't know. I think because you mentioned that such a diverse group of plants.
30,000 species, Austin.
Cool.
Over 100,000 registered hybrids.
That is wild. And I think it's that very fact that lends it to being rich with interest and stories and history. So we've got somebody who knows all that stuff. She's been living and breathing and hybridizing orchids for many, many years.
Literally fell in love over orchids with her husband, and now they cultivate them together. I mean, you got to love that.
Love it. So let's go ahead and jump into our interview with Dr. Dotty Woodson to learn all about the fascinating world of orchids. Here we go.
And then he said, let me show you something real exciting. And so he took me into this potting area and he showed me all these orchids. And, they were so different. The fragrance was different. The plants were different. The roots, oh my gosh, the roots were so different from anything else I'd done. I'm Dr. Dotty Woodson. I grow orchids. I've grown orchids since 1970, and I love, love, love to share my skills and knowledge with other people who are interested in growing orchids. Here in North America, we have 274 native orchids that grow in gardens all over the United States, all over Canada. The state flower of Minnesota is an orchid, a lady slipper's orchid. The state wildflower of New Hampshire is a lady slipper orchid. And so this is just so fun learning all this stuff. Worldwide, there's about 30,000 species of orchids. I think the Asteraceae crowd and the orchid crowd always are arguing who has the most species in the world. I think the orchids win. But anyway, it's just wonderful, wonderful. And you could get one, and it's what we call orchiditis. I know that sounds so funny, but you can catch the bug, and then you want a second one, and then you want a third one, and then you want a fourth one, and then you want to build a growing room, and then you want to grow a greenhouse. I mean, it's pretty contagious. So I'll warn you in advance.
I think I'm catching a case of the orchiditis already, Dotty. I'm coming down with a bad case of it.
Mostly what people are interested are growing not the native North American orchids, because a lot of them are very specific about the microorganisms and the soil and the climate they need. And they're not huge, wonderful, showy flowers, except in a field of wildflowers, like you would see the lady slipper orchids. And so what most people get interested in are the tropical orchids. They're large, they're fun to grow, they have fragrance, they have big flowers of every color in the rainbow. And it's just a wonderful hobby, because once you get started, then you get interested in another genera and another genera and another, about 600 plus generas of orchids. And so I think that people need to understand these tropical orchids are what are called epiphytic plants. A lot of people, instead of saying epiphytic, will say they're an air plant, like our Tillandsia bromeliads. They're an air plant. They cling to a tree, or a lithophytic plant. They cling to a rock, and they're clinging to that just to keep themselves off the floor of the forest where they're growing. So they won't get trumped on and eaten by all the creatures that run around the floor. But they're epiphytic. And so their root system is very different. It's a thick. It's not what we call fibrous root. Everyone knows about fibrous roots when you plant your annuals and your perennials and your shrubbery and your trees. But these aren't. These are very thick roots with a material on them called velamen. And this velamen acts like a sponge. Not only does it help the orchid cling to the trunk or the branch of the tree or the rock, but it is like a sponge. And so you see it absorbing water when it rains very fast, or you're watering it in your kitchen or your greenhouse or your backyard, and they turn green when their sponge is full of water. I mean, it's really fascinating to see this happen. And so because of that, I think that a lot of people need to know this, because the biggest killer of an orchid by a new person that doesn't have that knowledge is maybe going to let it sit in a bowl of water. Or a lot of people are selling orchids, a lot of the wholesalers are selling orchids in what I call vase pots. They're a vase. They have no holes for drainage in the bottom. And so people water their orchids and not give it another thought. But what happens is that water drains out, and then the orchid is sitting in water. What happens then is the potting material in that pot that you've put in the vase pot with the orchid in it wicks up the water. It wicks it up and creates an overwatering situation. And because the orchids don't need a lot of water, this causes a lack of oxygen. It starts rotting the roots. And next thing you know, the orchid's starting to wilt or drop its leaves. And, everyone say, what's wrong with my orchid? What's wrong with my orchid? And I can tell you right now, what's wrong with it is it's sat in water. And the potting material wicked the water up and created an overwatering situation, cuts off the oxygen to those roots. They like lots well, I keep saying oxygen, but really what they like is the nitrogen in the air we breathe. The air we breathe is mainly nitrogen. And that filament has mycorrhizae fungus on it that help it absorb this nitrogen from the air. So in nature, that's way, way, way important. But now when we're growing orchids, we can most certainly add water-soluble nitrogen fertilizer to them. Fun, fun things to learn.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's like the same adaptation that has allowed it to survive in those tropical conditions up off the forest floor are the same conditions that if you overwater it, you're just giving it too much. All that vellum that you said, it's almost velamin. The velamin is almost too good at its job sometimes. This is so cool. You've touched on it a little bit. Maybe we could elaborate. So you mentioned one of the first mistakes that people often make is just overwatering their orchids, letting them sit in standing water. Is in addition to that, are there other common mistakes you notice people making that are kind of easier to avoid?
Well, the number one orchid that is sold in the United States, Canada, Europe, and other parts of the world is the Phalaenopsis orchid. The Phalaenopsis is naturally from Southeast Asia. Since it's sold worldwide, the hybridizers are hybridizing them to the point where they'll put up two flowering stems instead of one. You know, everyone likes the white ones, of course, but they also have pink, light pink, dark pink, magenta.
The magenta
red.
ones are gorgeous.
Yeah.
I love them.
There are all kinds of them out there. And so, what you have to understand is that's a shade loving plant. Okay, so you mentioned Cattleyas earlier. Cattleya is a sun-loving plant. So I would be putting my Phalaenopsis outdoors for the summer because it's tropical. You have to bring it in for the winter. I'd put it outdoors where I grew my begonias. Or here in Texas, we have to put begonias in the shade. Or
Same.
palladiums, things like that. Now, Cattleyas are different. Cattleyas have thick foliage. They're very upright growing. They have a rhizome, and then they send a pseudobulb up, and another leaf, and another leaf, and another leaf. Thick, like shoe leather. They like a lot of sun. And so I could put those out in the sun for the summer if I didn't have a place in my house. That's the thing that everyone has to understand. What you have to do is look at where you're going to grow the plants and identify the conditions there. Is it shade, or is it part sun, or is it full sun? What's the humidity like? They like 50% and higher or higher. So what is that going to be like for you? They need to be in an area where they can drain and not ruin your furniture or your wall if you're going to mist them to get that humidity going. Although I don't like that because we have so much calcium in our water here. If you miss plants with that calcium in it, they're going to be white.
Yeah, white spots, white freckles everywhere on your leaves. You're oh, it's variegated. Nope, just hard water.
And so that's why I want everyone to know orchids are perennial. Well, according to agricultural statistics, the poinsettia is the number one by number of plants sold in the United States, right?
Wow.
It's also the number one throwaway plant. They throw it away after they're finished with it. Orchids, I hate this. Orchids are number two. Orchids are the number two bought flowering plant and they're the number two thrown away plant. And so that's why I always want to stress they're perennial. If you put that on a windowsill, let all the foliage of the Phalaenopsis face that great sunlight coming through that window, you're going to have it flower again. Some will flower 2 times a year, some flower 3 times a year. But the majority of them are going to flower once a year in early spring. That'll be February, March, April. My greenhouse might have several hundred orchids in bloom right now. In April, it's going to have 7,000 orchids.
Oh my gosh, Dotty.
See the difference? It's a daylight thing. It's a temperature thing, just like all plants, And so we have to understand if we look at what we're growing and where can we grow them, the window, identify that amount of sunlight. And the way you can do that is you can take your hand and when the sun is coming through that window, look at the shadow that your hand makes. If it makes a very, very well defined shadow, that means you got really, really good light. And that would be where you'd grow the medium or, the part shade light, part sun orchids and the full sun orchids. If it's very, very ephemeral, barely, barely defined shadow, then that's low light. And so that is where you're going to grow your low light requiring orchids. The other window where you get a well-defined shadow will where you grow your Oncidiums and your Cattleyas and your Vandas and your Wrinklestylis and your Renanthera. But the Phalaenopsis and the Paphiopedilums, they want that low light window. The other thing is that I run into this a lot. People call me back and say, "Oh, I found the exact window like you're describing." And I put my orchids there, and you said they'd be blooming by March and April. And they're not. They put on growth, but they're not blooming. And so the other thing that is restrictive of growing in a window is the amount of hours of light. And so, if it's not a south in North America, if it's not a south window, you're going to have a very, very short period of light through that window. But if it's a south window, you're going to have a long because the sun is always south in North America. Do you see the difference because you grow plants?
Oh yeah, if I was in Australia, we'd be looking north for more light, for sure.
In South America and Australia, yeah, you look north. Yeah.
Well, I've noticed the same thing too with mine. When I had them tucked in with, areas where maybe like my snake plants, my sansevieras were doing okay, and some of my low light house plants were doing fine. I noticed, my Phalaenopsis were struggling a little bit, and then boom, the minute I put them near, a south-facing window spot where they just get just a little bit more light. Put out a few more leaves. Put out the flower spike came right up, and I swear those things bloomed. I had the same 4 flowers on this one spike. They held on for 3.5 months.
Yeah,
and
don't do that. That's why Phalaenopsis are so popular.
Beautiful.
You can buy a $30 Phalaenopsis at the grocery store, right? Or you can buy a $30 flower arrangement. Well, the flower arrangement's going to last 5 to 7 days, and the orchid flowers are going to last 2 or 3 or even 4 months. So yeah, that's why they're so popular.
So you brought up, you are the Cattleya cowgirl. Can you talk a little bit about your love and enthusiasm for Cattleyas?
Cattleyas got so popular back in the 20s and 30s when the GIs were coming back from World War One or the Great War, and they wanted a big corsage. And so there were greenhouses built all over the East Coast from New York down, through Virginia that just grew white and purple Cattleyas because they also wanted the Cattleya flowers for wedding bouquets. The mother-in-law's, bouquet, and they had white and purple, and so one of the Cattleyas, for example, is named, Easter orchid. One of them's named Christmas orchid, because they bloom consistently at that time, and that's why they were so popular as corsages. They don't last long as a corsage, I hate to say, because they end up, you dance with someone and they smush it on you, but boy, it smells so good. But it's what we call a sympodal orchid. Phalaenopsis is a monopodal. There's just one stem. It puts on 2 new leaves every year, 2 new leaves. I can look at a Phalaenopsis, and I can tell you exactly how old it is by counting the pairs of leaves on it. A Cattleya is a rhizomatous plant, and so it'll put its rhizome up, and then a pseudobulb, and then a leaf. Then it'll grow maybe not even an inch, and then another pseudobulb and another leaf. Grow again. And so it grows across your pot, and there's very different ways to train Cattleyas so it can stay in a pot more than 1 year, and be pruning it, in order to get it to branch out. But anyway, wonderful, wonderful plant. But I just have to warn everyone, that it needs a lot of light. I have a doctor friend. She bought some shelves to put out on her porch that faces Lake Eagle Mountain. And believe it or not, she puts her Cattleyas out there every single summer. And then she brings them in, so they're not going to freeze. And by December and January and February, it's Cattleya heaven in her house. They put on the growth they needed while they were growing outdoors. And Phalaenopsis will do this too. They'll put on the 2 leaves they need. Cattleyas will put on new growth. Flowers only on new growth, just like our landscape plants. How many times do you have that question? Well, my hydrangea never blooms. Well, when did you prune it? Well, after all the leaves fell off. Well, that's why it's not blooming, because you cut the buds off. It's a spring flowering plant. It puts its buds on in the fall. And so orchids are that same way. We just have to look at it like that.
Is there what would you recommend for like an intermediate grower, someone who's kind of dipping their toe into the water a little bit and they're like, I've done the moth orchids, I love them, I'm ready to move on to something a little bit more challenging or interesting. What would you recommend?
An Oncidium or anything in the Oncidium alliance. An Oncidium is a rhizomatous orchid too. It puts up pseudobulbs in the leaves and pseudobulbs in the leaves, but it is a very, very showy plant. Cattleyas aren't that nice looking plant, but it puts up these beautiful, beautiful leaves, and then it'll bloom on the new growth. And it puts out very, very tall, long spikes in yellow, bright, 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 bright yellow. You would be walking down a path somewhere in South America, and you're going, oh my gosh, what are all those yellow things over there blooming? And they're Oncidiums, because they're so showy bright. Not huge, huge, huge flowers, although they have been hybridized to the point where there are huge flower ones, but they put out very, very tall spikes. Very tall, very showy.
Love it.
Easy to grow. And like any plant, it enjoys being fertilized. And the way I tell beginners is think about the 1st of the month and the 15th of the month. The reason why you want to set something like that, a pattern like that, is because when the 1st comes around, and now it's the 4th of whatever, and you go, I forgot to fertilize my plant. You go back and fertilize them. And same with the 15th. When the 15th comes around and you pass it and forget to fertilize, then you're going to remember to go back and do it. They like water-soluble fertilizer, mainly high nitrogen. I use a 15-5-15, or really it's a 15-5-10. But there are all kinds of different formulas. It doesn't have to say orchid fertilizer on it. All water-soluble fertilizers are good. It is nice for it to have, magnesium in it, like Mag-Amp, something like that. But don't get hung up on that either. Just feed it. I have talked to people, that orchid's 7 years old and it's never bloomed. And I'm going, where is it? Oh, it's in my living room on the table right there. Like where you'd grow Paphos ivy.
Where it's getting no light.
No direct light. That's right. Well, it doesn't really need direct light. It needs good light. But she'd never fertilized them. You have to fertilize them? Yeah, you have to fertilize them. I mean, if you want a good growth and good flowers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all the orchids are that timing. You can do it on the 1st and the 15th, or just set the dates you want to set. And you do it all through the growing season. You can slow that down during the winter when most of the plants are resting. But you got to fertilize them.
Got to fertilize. I know you forget when a plant is so small and kind of unseemly. You're like, it's probably fine. It's probably getting enough from the soil or the orchid mix or whatever. But your advice that you just gave was so spot on, because I've kind of I've got a little bit of orchiditis these last few years, and I've been growing a bit at home. And actually, I was going to mention this to you. I bet this happens. I wonder if this happens to you all the time, where, like we mentioned, a lot of people sadly are treating their orchids like throwaway plants and kind of as annuals, but they're perennials, and they can come back year after year and kind of continually grow for you. Do you ever rescue people's orchids, like your friends and family, where they're like, hey, I got it. I enjoyed it for a few weeks. I don't know what to do. And they just hand it off to you. And you're like, dude, you just gave me gold. And then you nurture them back to health. I've got a little bit of that going on in my world. So I nurtured some back to health and did that pruning, like you mentioned, where I gave it a bit more light, gave it just a touch of slow release fertilizer, and boom, we got some flowers, enjoyed them, pruned them back just a little bit. And it repeated blooming like so quickly. I was shocked. And so I've been, so what you said, I was like, this is spot on. And I've just recently did this these past few seasons, and I'm like, this really works. So that's great advice.
Okay. The other thing I'm going to share with you then, this is with all potted orchids. Eventually, because bark is the main ingredient of the potting material, eventually that breaks down into compost and it holds too much water and not enough air. And so eventually you're going to have to take the orchid out of the pot, rinse all that old potting material off, get some new potting material. Most of your garden centers sell little hobby bags that have about enough to do 2 or 3, sometimes 4, depending on the size of the orchid, potted up. Wet that down first and only wet the amount you're going to need to put in that pot. You don't want to store wet potting material. And so, and then repot it, work it in amongst the roots, make sure that the Phalaenopsis, because it is sort of one-sided, it doesn't need to be turned. You want the greatest growth facing the greatest light. And that's true with Oncidiums, that's true with Cattleyas, that's true with Cymbidiums. Vandas is a little bit different, but that's okay.
All right, Dr. Dotty Woodson, I think it's official. You coughed into the microphone, and I've got myself some orchiditis. I got to thank you so much for making time for us. Did you have fun today?
Yes, thank you for inviting me to do the podcast with you. I think that sharing the information is so important because I think that everyone thinks orchids are so difficult to grow, and they're not.
I love it. There we go. I'll leave it right there. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Dotty Woodson, grower, horticulturalist, educator, orchid whisperer extraordinaire. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, we are back from our interview with Dr. Dotty Woodson, the Orchid Whisperer. What a blast. And Kevin, what do you think?
I love her. She's amazing. Dude, instant fave. I mean, what a lovely person. And honestly, she mentioned it. It is contagious. It was infectious. People couldn't see her, but as we were interviewing, she was smiling the whole time. And I felt like I was talking to like someone who was just learning about something for the first time, who's like so excited about a passion they have, but it's not. She's been doing it for years, and she's still enthusiastic and is in love with these plants. She mentioned how there's like this mystery to orchids, but I think it's also the discovery of, discovering, because there's always something new. And I think she just loves learning and sharing. And man, we got to be here for it. So how lucky are we? And really, I think when it all comes down to it is orchids, the mystery and the myth is that, they're difficult. You just get them for a little while, then you toss them out. No, if you get your hands on one, keep it growing. When those blooms fade, they can come back pretty easily with a little bit of care. And she proved that. And so they're not that difficult. They deserve more than just being thrown away and tossed away. Let's keep our orchids. Let's cultivate them. Let's grow them, share them. So don't throw it out. Keep it, grow it, and love it.
I love that. And I think you should explore, if you like orchids, all these different varieties. Like, we all know the phals, right? But these Cattleyas and these other things, let's explore all these cool other varieties of orchid.
There's
they're
monkey
different.
orchids, Austin. Monkey orchids. I mean, the vandas, the slippers, the dendrobiums. And when they do bloom, I mean, some of these flowers, they look like they've been crafted by an artist. They're so beautiful. And with folks like her and her husband, Barry, they're hybridizing and making new varieties all the time. And guess what? There are still some species out there yet to be discovered.
Ooh.
And some of them are actually growing in our own backyard. She mentioned how we have a lot of native orchids in our own region. California has native orchids. Texas, where she's from, they've got over 50 native orchids. So there's something for everybody. I don't know. It's a whole cool world out there. And if it is infectious or whatever, I'm feeling a little bit of the orchiditis.
Okay, all right. That's awesome. That's all the time for this week. Kevin, go ahead and take us out.
Well, another amazing week in the books. Big thank you to Dr. Dotty, and thank you to all the listeners for tuning in. We love having you here. I hope your days, your weeks, and your gardens are going great. And please come back next week for more garden fun, because we'll be here waiting for you. Until then, garden friends, happy gardening to you all, and please never stop growing.